Good. Good morning, everybody. So I guess the career fair will continue beyond this session. It will stop at, okay. So I just want to, before I kind of go through my presentation here, I just want to know what some of the thoughts you have, or what challenges you face, or why are you here other than the career fair? In other words, and I want you to be clear that I'm standing between your stomach and lunch. So I want to make sure that we stop at 12 so that you don't continue to starve your stomach. So just raise some of your hands and say, you know, my problem is I don't know how to advance my career. My problem is my boss. My problem is I'm stuck where I am. And sometimes when I have a large crowd, I usually tell people to shut their eyes, and then I'll ask a question. How many of you suffer from a bad boss? So people will then raise their hand because nobody's seeing who they are. Otherwise, when I ask, they say, oh, my friends have a terrible boss. And they all have a friend who has a terrible boss, but they have a great boss. So let me just ask a few questions. How many of you are here? Now close your eyes, all of you, so you don't know who is raising their hands. And I'll tell you how many hands are raised so you know how many people in this crowd of like maybe 50 or so. So how many of you feel like you're not advancing in your career as much as you should be, or your friends are doing better than you are? This is a common refrain I see. Raise your hands. About 6 of them. Don't look at others. Don't open your eyes. Otherwise it defeats my survey here. How many of you, okay, about 6 or 7. How many of, that's about 10%. How many of you have a bad boss? No one. This is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. Because 80% of the bosses are bad. I don't know if you know that. I'm not making this up. This is proven over survey over 60 years, past 60 years. That number has not changed. Okay, how many of you like to go in a new direction, new career, new direction? Wow, terrific, about 10% again. This is great. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, and then I will ask you to tell me what is that you want, because I have a script here, but I would rather make it yours than mine. So how many of you came here to say, you know, I want to know how to reinvent myself, or I want to know how to be a better manager, or I want to know how to be better, whatever. So can you just tell me what it is that you're here for? Yes?
I think I kind of speak for the majority of the crowd here.
Uh-huh.
Most of us are just starting off, or just started off, or are in our early years of the career.
Okay.
And for me personally, some of the biggest challenges are to know when I should stay and continue what I'm doing, or when should I say that, okay, this is it, I need to make a switch.
Great question. Terrific question.
Yeah, and especially in this Bay Area,
yeah,
the tenure of people working at the company is generally short. I don't see a lot of people staying in a company for 10 years, 15 years anymore, especially our generation.
Yeah.
So I need your thoughts on that, and also probably your answer on
yeah. Great, thank you for asking that question. So let me rephrase the question because some of you may not have heard it. He's in the first phase of the career, early stage. He wants to know how long to continue in this stage, and when to make a move, and how long to stay in one place, because Silicon Valley is... Anybody else? I'll take one more and then start, because we're going to run out of time. Yes, go ahead.
Actually, I have the opposite perspective.
Uh-huh.
I think I've been in my company and my larger team for 7 years.
Uh-huh.
And I'm trying to see, am I getting too comfortable where I am?
Yeah. Terrific. Great question. Another great question. So the question she's asking is, she has been in this company for 7 years. She's feeling comfortable. I like to rephrase that and say she's getting complacent. And what she should do next. And this is another common thing that I'll tell you a story, as a matter of fact, what happens when you stay too long. Okay, so with that, I will kind of start with where I think how you need to look at your career and what has helped me, having worked with almost 7,000 clients, now 6,500 some clients in 23 countries. And the theme doesn't change no matter where I go. And I don't only work with high tech or any particular vertical of clients. Some of my clients, in fact, some movie stars are my client, as an example. and some entertainers are my clients. So, and one of my clients is a neurosurgeon. So it doesn't matter what phase of the career you are, but what matters is the themes that they face in their careers, no matter what they do, and how common the solutions are that I've codified of working with for the past 18 years. So I'm going to go through some of my own story and maybe answer these questions as a part of that story. And then if you have some additional questions, maybe the last 10 minutes, we'll leave them to you to say, okay, so you told me this, but how do I do that? So let me tell you my own story. I was head of engineering at a high-tech company, and at the age of 48, I was laid off. That was my first layoff. And I asked myself the question, I could probably find a job as head of engineering. This was 30 years ago now. Head of engineering in another company. But then I asked myself the question, what am I going to do if I'm laid off at 58 or 68? And I did not have an answer. So I said, I need to make a change. And that answers the lady's question, what happens when you become complacent? So what I decided to do at that time, rather than look for another job, I decided to look for opportunities that were not obvious to somebody in technology. I was head of engineering in a technology company called Birla. We used to do microwave communication gear. And so at that time, AIDS was a very big thing, late 1980s. And nobody had an instrument to detect AIDS. And there was a company called Becton Dickinson, it's still here in San Jose, it's a biotech company. And the president of the company was speaking. And he said that we have figured out how to detect AIDS. We have a development process under works. And within 6 years, we'll have this machine. And I was sitting in the crowd like you are now. And I said, why does it take 6 years? So I went with him as he was finishing his talk and walking to his anteroom. And I said, I love your talk, but why does it take 6 years? And he said, well, clinical trials, FDA approval, this, that, this, that. I said, what if I showed you how to do this in 3 years? And I had no idea how to do that, but I just asked him that question. And he said, how can you do that in 3 years? I said, look, I come from high tech. In high tech, our product life cycles are typically 12 to 18 months. And what if I showed you how to do that in 3 years? He said, come on over and show us how to do it. Next day, I was in front of his executive committee, telling them how I would do it. And in 3 years, I was engaged there for 3 years, and we got it out in 3 years. The point I want to make is this. At that time, I was out of work. I didn't have a job. I didn't know what job to go after. But I saw an opportunity in a completely different vertical. I have no personally any biotech background. And I was able to convince this president of the company that there is a way to do this in much shorter time, and theirs was the first AIDS machine in the market. It's still on the market. It's called FaxScan, I think. So the point I want to make is this, that each time we want to make a change, we focus on what we don't know. We don't focus on what they need, which is a very different perspective. So if you can take that perspective about, what does my resume look like, instead of focusing on your past, which is your resume, focus on what the needs are and how can you translate what you've done in a language that they understand, which is hard for most people, especially those who come from technology. I'll give you another example. I have a client now, he's no longer working with me, but he got what he wanted. He was working on Higgs boson that was discovered about 3 years ago or something, or so. And he had done a lot of work in high particle, high energy physics and all of that stuff. And he said, now that Higgs boson has been discovered, I don't know what to do with myself. And he was in the Valley. So I said, what do you want to do? He said, well, there are not many jobs in physics anymore because there is no other boson of any kind that's being discovered. So I said, how did you do what you did? And he told me that he was basically attending to very high data sets, very large data sets. And he's extracting from it how to look for certain patterns and how to identify when there is a pattern of Higgs boson. That's what he was discovering. So I said, why don't we repackage you as a data scientist and completely change the language? He was using language like fermions, bosons, and those kinds of things. So I said, we completely change your resume, completely change your resume. and make you look like a data scientist. And now he's a data scientist at Apple. He's completely gone away from physics. So the point I want to make is this, that a lot of the times we get stuck in what we know, and we forget to see how what we know can be applied horizontally. And then the other thing that compounds it is, how do we limit ourselves by what we don't have? For example, people say, Dilip, I'm already 50 and I don't think there are any jobs for me anymore because I'm too old for this. I said, you're wrong. I'll give you another story. I have a client who came to me when he was 73 years old. He was senior fellow at HP Labs. And when HP Labs closed in 2017, he came to me and he said, Dilip, I have never looked for a job. I don't even know if these jobs exist anymore. Can you help me find a job? And the first thing he said is, I'm 73, can you find me a job? I said, forget the fact how old you are. I said, at that time I was 75. I said, look, I have yet one more career to go ahead of me. So don't worry about your age. Let's talk about what you need. And he said, here is what I can do for anybody who is interested in what I do. So instead of looking for a job that did not exist for him, we created a job for him. And the way we created the job for him is, there is a consortium of telcos like Verizon and AT&T and all of these companies have gotten together, and they have their own thing called Cable Labs, which is like Bell Labs. And they develop new technologies for the next 5 years, 7 years, and so forth. And so we looked at what they do, and the two things we found out about them is, first of all, they were not here in the Silicon Valley, they were in Salt Lake City. And the second thing is, they're looking ahead of amalgamating all these technologies that, like Bell Labs did, to create new technologies for the next frontier in communications. So we wrote a letter to the CEO of Cable Labs and said, first of all, if you want to be like Cable Labs, you have to be in the Valley. And if you have to be in the Valley, you need somebody like this client of mine who can run those labs. And that's the letter we sent FedEx to the CEO of the Cable Labs. And within a month, he was employed as head of the labs in the Silicon Valley, which they started working about 2 years ago now, I think. So the point I want to make is this, that we limit ourselves by what we do and what we know. We don't look at what the market needs are and how to frame those needs in a language that's foreign to us. For example, when I reached the biotech company, Becton Dickinson, I did not use the language that I was used to, like microwaves and S-band and Q-band and Ka-band. That's the microwave language. I used the language FDA approval, clinical trials, development cycle, that kind of a language. And unless you make that conversion in your head before you approach in a new direction, you're going to be stuck in where you are. So part of what you want to do is decide the direction in which there are opportunities, and I just made a list here, I'm not going to go through the list, but I will cite some examples of it, just like I did for this physics guy that Higgs boson, is that depending on where your interest lies, you can say, I want to go in that direction. So the things you want to do are at the bottom of the page. And I have done those with my clients, and I gave you some of those examples. So let me go through that. So translate your vertical expertise into horizontal skill that can be transferred in a new vertical, like big data analytics into bioinformatics or biotech, like I showed you with this, what this guy did, or what I did with 30 years ago now. And learn that language and associate yourself with the groups that play that trade. So instead of having in your network everybody who does big data, let's say you're a big data expert, find somebody in the vertical that you want to go, and find some thought leaders, like you go to a conference in particular vertical that you're interested in, and connect with them, talk to them, and invite them to be your network. Now your network on LinkedIn looks different. One of the worst things you can do is have a very monolithic network on your LinkedIn that all says, all this guy is connected with, or this person is connected with, is big data. That will limit you. So always use that. Another thing, I'll tell you how I did it. I have a client who made 5 or 6 attempts to apply at AWS, Amazon Web Services. Never got a response. We had a great resume, but never got a response. So I said to him, look for an article on LinkedIn written by somebody in a managerial level who works in Amazon Web Services, and make a really insightful comment on that blog. So he found that article somebody wrote, he knew that person, by name in AWS, and he wrote an article about the future of AWS and how, cloud native is going to take over and all that kind of stuff. So he made a comment after did some work research. He made a very thoughtful comment on the blog. Turns out the manager absolutely loved the comment. He said, well, that's a very insightful comment. So he asked the recruiter to contact this guy, who is my client now. And he was invited to actually have an interview at AWS. Now, that's about a month ago, it's still pending. But the point I want to make is, we take a very linear approach to how we campaign and how we market ourselves. There is so much more that you can do by doing the things I told you. Namely, don't just send a resume, but do something creative. The other thing I've done, in fact, in my first book, when 2001, everybody was laying off, a client of mine had a great idea on one of the Apple computers. And he said, well, it's very hard to maintain this computer. I have a great idea. So we took that idea and wrote a letter to Steve Jobs. It's in my book, that letter is in my book, and sent it FedEx. And within 2 days, his secretary called my client and said, this is an interesting idea, Mr. Jobs wants to meet with you. Now, this was when everybody was laying up. This is 2001 now. So the point I want to make is, there is always an avenue available to you. You have to be creatively able to exploit it. And you have to be different. Now, how do you make that difference? So I'll tell you 2 things that will help you. And I'll tell you my own story. And my own story is this, that we are very good at our elevator pitch. A 20-second, 30-second pitch that says, this is what I do. But we don't tell that story to ourselves and own it. And unless you own your own story, you really have an elevator pitch, and that's about all you have. And I'll tell you an example of my own. When I started, this is my 5th career now, I had 4 careers before this in very different verticals. When I started career coaching, people asked me, Dilip, what do you do? And I said, I do career coaching. That was my response. After having a few hundred clients, I said, no, I just don't do career coaching, I am a career coach. So to go from I do career coaching to I am a career coach was to me a transformational change. From going from doing to being, right? After about 1,000 clients, I changed the story yet again. I said to myself first that I'm the best career coach there is. And if there's anybody better, I would like to know who that is. That's the story I told myself. And once I owned that story, it completely changed my practice. And I became LinkedIn's #1 coach because I have more recommendations than any other coach. So people said, yeah, you are the best coach. Well, the point is, I had to own that first before I started telling other people. So what we suck at, really good, bad at, is the story we tell ourselves. And unless we tell the story to ourselves and own it, you really don't have an elevator pitch. It's just an elevator pitch. Think about that. I was talking to Harish, I don't want to mention his last name, but conversation I had with him was, he wants to go from hardware development to product management. And the way he has done that, and he's on the path to doing that, is he decided to take on customer-facing roles voluntarily. And now he's doing that in his company, and people see him as a customer-facing person. Now on his resume, he will have customer-facing stories that tell about who he is and what he wants to do. And I have no doubt that very soon he'll be a product manager. So part of what you want to do, and to answer the lady's question in the back, is if you feel stagnant after being there for 7 years, you need to look at what you want to do and what you want to do different. That will change and refresh your career. Maybe a new employer, maybe a new job, maybe a new career. Each one of those things are different. And my mantra is change employers every 3 years, change jobs every about 5 years, and change career every about 10 years. I have done that myself. And this is my 5th career. So part of what I want you to do is, not just because you make a lot of money and you feel inertia and you feel complacent, stay in the job, but think of where you want to be in the next phase of your career. And until you think that way and develop your own story and learn how to tell that story, you will be stuck where you are. You'll make a lot of money, but that's not where it's at me. One of my clients, in fact, I had 2 clients this morning, and I have a questionnaire, and he wrote that I don't want to leave this world not knowing what my sweet spot was. That's a profound statement. So I want you to find your sweet spot. And once you find it, it will change your life. So the other thing I want to say here is you take some risks in doing so. This is not free. In other words, I have taken risk 5 times and I have got a lot of setbacks, but that's not what bothered me. What bothered me was that I was not pursuing my path. And until I got to that point where I was able to pursue it, I wanted to continue to do it until I found my path. And that's what I want you to do. So we're running out of time here. I want to, in the last 5-7 minutes, any questions that you have. I know it's hard to implement what I told you, but I have done it, so it's practicable. It's not theory that I'm speaking to you. Okay, any questions?